My name is Rich Bireley. I'm a life member of the Sacramento Aquarium Society, the Pacific Coast Cichlid Association, and the San Francisco Aquarium Society, along with my wife Laura. We're in Latrobe, California, which is a tiny community. It's actually, our zip code is Shingle Springs, so we don't have a mail a post office here. We've been here since 2004, and we built this building with the intention of it housing my fish hobby. It's 2,000 square feet warehouse, and it's insulated with spray-in foam, mostly treated lumber. So it's a steel building with about 8 inches of foam. I do it by myself, and maybe it's an intelligence test, but I am not set up in any way automated, so everything is pretty much done by hand. It's a ton of work, and I would not recommend it to most people. We also do some reptiles, so we have a small number. We have some tortoises and lizards and snakes and, you know, some odds and ends, and it's likely that a frog will jump across the screen at some point because there's lots of frogs in here because we can't keep them out. I heat the room now with a unit called a mini split, and it heats, and it can air condition, heat, and also dehumidifies. So that would be up on the wall up there. You can see the inside part of the mini split, and I'm so glad I did that. We also have solar, so we're essentially not paying a bunch of money to run all this electricity. I like big tanks. That may be somewhat apparent. And my first big tank was from probably 35 years ago. I got this 360-gallon aquarium, and with the one exception of this Malawi fish, it is a Tanganyikan community, and so I like sump filters, and so you'll see sumps, and I prefer them on top of the tank rather than below the tank because there's not an issue with flooding or anything, and it does make it a little more difficult to clean them because you have to climb up there and get stuff out, but I work and modify them, and everything is always changing. So I already know like 10 things I need to do having nothing to do with just cleaning up the room. Or doing water changes, which seems to take most of my time. I'll carry this flashlight with us. So this is a 900-gallon aquarium, and it also has a sump on top, and it's set up for Malagasy fishes, so Malagasy cichlids here in the front. And then, unfortunately, somehow, from the tub, which we'll see later, some fry of the Restratus got through, and also an Oreochromos, which is super annoying because the Oreochromos in particular is really aggressive, and I'd like to get him out of there, but chasing a fish in a 900 is, you definitely need, you need lots of help, and you need lots of hands to catch him. There's also a trio of the wide bar silver dollars in here, and I'll see if that helps. So I got these at probably, you know, like a 50-cent piece size, or, you know, an inch in diameter, and that's obviously a big male, and that's going to be a female, and then that one I don't know if it's going to be a male or a female, but we'll find out. So they're growing up in there, and they're pretty mild-mannered, and they are like a good dither fish. So for a long time I heated with gas, so we have the Resner heater up top, and it's still functional. Just once we installed solar, it seemed to make sense to get away from using gas and, you know, rely on electricity. So we have the mini split, and we use that pretty much for both heating and cooling. There's also, I have a full freezer and a refrigerator in the room. As I said, it's 2,000 square feet, and so when I buy fish food, I'm buying, you know, 40-pound bags of I'll look for a high protein pond food, and I'll get pellets in 2 or 3 sizes, and then I'll buy flake. I just bought 8 pounds of Tetramin flake food. So I buy bulk because I can feed off, you know, I mean, I could feed off a pound of flakes, or I'll certainly feed off a pound of pellets in any given day pretty easily. So it doesn't make sense to buy small containers of food. I also feed a lot of live food, which is what the freezers are for. I try and store my food in the freezer or the refrigerator until it's going to be out in a container where I'm actually using it. And then I also feed a lot of frozen foods, so I'll keep those in the freezer. And we do have snakes, so I buy frozen rodents, and then we'll thaw and feed the snakes the frozen rodents. So got to have a freezer, got to have a refrigerator, especially if I do like the California brown worms. So I'll buy a pound or a pound and a half at a time, and that'll last me, you know, through the week. So refrigerator and freezer are absolutely necessary. I cultivate live foods for the reptiles. So this is mealworms, and it looks pretty bad right now, but there's a lot of the beetle, the worms turn into a cocoon, and then that hatches into these beetles. And there's probably a lot of baby worms in here. So I bought mealworms once, I don't know, about a year ago, and then I just keep them on egg laying mash. And the nice thing about egg laying mash is that essentially your insect is gut loaded, right? So I can take these and feed them to my reptiles, and they already have plenty of calcium and the full nutrients in there that a chicken or you know, something like that needs for its nutrition. So you know, it saves me having to powder and you know, try and gut load them separately. They just live on a gut loading, nutrient rich and substrate. I also cultivate cockroaches, dubia roaches, which are pretty nasty, but I make more on dubia roaches than I do on fish, which is it's just a hobby. So I'll take a load of the dubia roaches up, and I get paid for dubia roaches, which is the weirdest thing to me, but we do feed some off to some of the geckos. So thought, well, we'll just cultivate them and make something a little more out of them. I'm trying to switch over to the steel racking, and there's pros and cons with this. The feet are a real con because they rot out. And this rack, so I've set it up, but it's not near done. And I would like to bring it off the wall a little more and get a couple more tanks and get a sump on it and have everything kind of attached together. And I do quarantine fish. So once fish are on a wall like this, they stay here. I'm not adding brand new fish that are new to the fish room. All fish come into the fish room. They're quarantined in a couple of different tanks depending on how large they are before they go into any kind of a community tank. So avoid a lot of problems that way. I mentioned the frogs earlier, and that's a real problem. I've had ick outbreaks several times, and I have wondered if it's not the frogs moving around the room and maybe moving the ick. But it's very difficult to get rid of them. So we are crawling with tree frogs, and we just have learned to live with it. It's just frustrating. But I have lots of gray fish, and this tank could be cleaned a little, but let's see if we can get a little light on it. But they're West African, Stomatepia mariae, and then there's Oreochromis esculentus in here. And they're both mouth-brooding species, and the esculentus is supposed to be, I've been told that it's endangered, and esculentus means they taste good. So they are considered a prize fish in Africa where they are native, and they've been overfished. So it's a big, bizarre fish, and hopefully we'll be able to keep them in the hobby. We also keep a lot of catfish, and we try and grow up catfish for I'll call it the tub. So this guy's a little, this is 3, they're called an Indian shovel nose. and the dominant one is down there. They tend to not like each other. This is a 180-gallon tank, and one is dominant and pushing the other two around. So we have a big one, and then a middle one, and then a small one, which actually is in better shape than the middle one. And you know, just trying to get them big enough to do something with them. And there's also Ramphichromys in here and a couple other things. But the tank is basically for growing these shovel nose. They're supposed to grow to 4 feet or maybe a little more. And I do have the space for it, which you'll see later. I like big catfish, and these guys are not that big, but that is Meridodonus tigrinus. So do I have light? Yeah, there he is. It's just a beautiful fish. It used to be Brachyplatystoma, and it was described, it might have been described by Marty Britton, who was a professor at Sac State in the 60s and 70s, and into the 80s. He also was a founding member of the Sacramento Aquarium Society, I believe. I was recently sent some West African cichlids. Oh, well, there's catfish everywhere, so I'm a huge catfish fan. So there's Oxidorus irwini and Synodontis decorus, but that is a West African, it's called Coptodon decardi or Coptodon nigrans. And just coincidentally, if you pan to the left, that dark cloud on the bottom, that is fry. So I've had them for less than 2 months, and they have what looks like about 500 fry in a pile there. And there's a good 7-inch Synodontis angelicus in here as well, which are meaner than heck for those of you that have had them. And that pair of fish are protecting their fry from those big Synodontis and the Megalodorus or Oxidorus irwini. It's pretty impressive. It shows you how tough they are when it comes to guarding their fry. I should have moved that scale. At one point we did large monitor lizards, and the best way to weigh them was to pick them up and hold them and climb on the scale. So I'd weigh myself, then grab the lizard, wrestle it until I had a good grip on it, stand on the scale, and we'd know what the monitor weighed. So that's why it's a relic. I had somebody give me this tank of little plecos. And so these are the true zebra pleco. And I do need to heat them up a little bit and kind of get them going, but there's also a Royal Farlowella in there, but it's set up for the zebra plecos. And unfortunately, the collection or the location where those fish are native, the Rio Xingu in Brazil, they put a big dam in, and it's now a lake. It's no longer a river, and this fish is probably extinct in the wild. So it's pretty sad. We're going to see a lot of extinctions of fish in Brazil over the next couple of decades because of all the dams that are going in, and it's going to be really sad. A lot of the fish we have in the hobby today are not going to be here, and we're losing fish now. So it's going to get much worse. It's not going to get better. I haven't brought fish since COVID, really, so I do quarantine everything, and I got this pair of I got these fish from the cichlid exchange. I think is it a cellifer? It's a really, they were yellowish when I got them, so they may not like my diet quite as much. And then there's, so it's Synodontis, and then that is, name is just left, just like that. It's a type of giraffe cat, so it's an African large cat. It's Bauchi. Ochinoglanus is the genus. So it's not one you commonly see. It's much heavier bodied than the common giraffe cat, and it doesn't get quite as long, but it's a much bulkier fish. And so I thought it'd be fun to try them. And if you notice, I don't have one of much. I like to have groups of things because you never know when we'll figure out how to breed things. So I acquired wild Synodontis poli in the 90s. It's a Lake Tanganyika fish, and I had them, and Synodontis in particular can go 30 years plus. They live a very long time. So I had them for about 15, 18 years, and people started spawning Synodontis lucipinus, and I thought, I'll bet these poli spawned the same way. So I set them up like lucipinus, and the next thing you know, I had 500 poli, and I started selling them, and I sold a bunch to a guy in the Bay Area named Anthony too. And he was he is an extremely good fish breeder, just a really good aquarist. And he kept saying, Rich, you need to sell these on eBay. You really need to. And I was like, I've had some experiences on eBay, mostly with shipping, and I just didn't want to deal with it. So after a couple of years, he broke down and he started shipping them. And I believe that all of the poli in the U.S. originated from my original wild group that I got in the early 90s. I hadn't really seen them ever on a list, and I don't see the timing really matched up well to Anthony starting to distribute them nationwide, and suddenly it's a fish that you see in wholesalers. So you never know when we'll figure out how to spawn a fish, and if you only have one, you definitely can't do it. So I think there's value in trying to make sure you have the space for multiples of whatever you're going to work with the idea that maybe a decade from now, hey, this isn't so hard, I just didn't know what to do. And I'll show you how I spawned Synodontis, the lucipinus, and the poli a while, so that you too, if you wanted, could spawn yours. It's not difficult, it just requires a little bit of equipment. So even with large fish tanks, if you're going to work with fish, you need a small place, a smaller tank to raise them. And so I have probably the busiest aisle in my fish room is this aisle. And the reason being, it's a bunch of small tanks, so I can raise small fish, and I can raise fry. And get them up to a reasonable size. So we have, as an example, this is good question, Rich. Aspidorus pilotus. Luckily, it was on the tag. So we spawned a bunch of Aspidorus pilotus, and we're trying to get them up a little bit bigger before we send them out. And the adults from these came from the SAS meeting. Carlos and Diane, and they are cutting way down on their hobby, and I think that's a really sad thing for the hobby in general. They're just super people and great fish hobbyists. But we all do what we do, and so we're also lucky to have had them keeping and breeding fish and gracing us with their presence while they did. So just really great people and great fish. But like I said, I raise fish, so these are some little Lake Victoria fish that are just about up to size. As a matter of fact, there's a male showing some color. So this one is actually very difficult to get, and I'll probably keep the females, and I don't know what we'll do with the males. I also spawned these Dimidia Chromos Restratus, and there's that male is really showing some color, and I've got to move them or he is going to really turn on the rest of his tank mates. But it's a beautiful predator from Lake Malawi, and just spectacular. I saw these at Leif de Mason's fish farm when I was in Florida, and we were doing the Poor Man's Fish Collecting Tour with Chuck Rambo. And we went to Leif de Mason's place, and I saw those in a burial vat. So instead of bodies, they keep fish in them in Florida. And they were so beautiful, I told Leif, I just really need to have some of those. So I got home, and he sent me some, and I'm very happy he did. I think it's just a spectacular fish. Those are babies, and they're just going to get bluer and bluer, and they get big, and they're predatory. So if you like a big, beautiful, predatory Malawi hap, I mean, that's as good as anything out there. They're stunning. It's very tight in here, so this is obviously not a small tank. This is a Lake Tanganyika community and a colony of Tropheus duboisi, Mazwa, Halembe, whatever, that were growing up. and also 2 different species of Xenotilapia, Rubro labiata and Bathyphilus. And I went to a huge amount of effort. I've been trying to spawn Nasuta, Ophthalmotilapia nasuta, these grayish fish in the mid-water. They will turn bright or very yellow when they're adults. And I raised them up and I started looking at them and I was like, okay, that's a male, that's a male, that's a male, that's a male. So I bought 6 fish, I raised up 5, and I got 1 female. So it's really good idea if you want to spawn, especially a mouth breeder, but most fish, you really, if you start with less than 6, you're really limiting your options. And if you're going to spend the money to buy these fish, spend a tiny bit more to get enough to ensure that you can work with them. Because if I bought 3 or 4, who knows, I might have gotten the 3 or 4 males, I'd have had nothing. I would have had some nice fish, but no way to spawn them whatsoever. So I think 6 is a good minimum. I like to buy 12 or more with a lot of the mouth breeders, like these Duboisi. You can see there's probably 20 to 25 young Duboisi in here. And I think, you know, for a colony like Tropheus, that's a nice number to start with, and they look like they're, you know, pretty good quality fish. So we'll see what happens. I do cories on this aisle, small fish. I also, so that's Gossii, and there's some pencil fish in there. And the Gossii have spawned in that tank regularly. So they, for my experience, cories spawn in one of 2 ways, or cory, I'll just call it the whole group of fishes, which would be Scleromystics, Corydoras, Aspidorus. They either lay their eggs on the glass or they put them in a mop or on plants. And to me, I mean, my experience has been that they, a lot of them prefer mops. Like for me, panda never spawn on the glass. I've never seen panda eggs on the glass, but I can pull 50 panda eggs out of a synthetic yarn mop, you know, every couple of weeks if I'm feeding them up and taking good care of them and making sure they have, you know, good fat bellies. So for me, they don't spawn on the glass. But then Gossii, like these guys, always spawn on the glass. So I've never, you know, at one point I had a lot of Java moss in there, and I'd see a few eggs in the Java moss, but most of it was stuck on the glass up near the surface. And Scleromystics barbatus, same thing. For me, they've always spawned sticking the eggs on the glass, and I use a razor blade and scrape them off. So it's interesting, if you have cories and they haven't spawned, or you think they're not spawning, drop them up in there and see what happens. Same with cory Sturbae. So I have Sturbae up to my left, and I've got a bunch of them up there. And for me, those are a mop spawner, but I know a lot of people have had those spawn on the glass. So for me, it's a mop. For other people, it's glass. The fish will tell you, because you don't see any fry, and you drop a mop in there, and now you have a bunch of eggs, and you're ready to, you know, you can work with it. So consider a mop if you haven't tried it. So I noticed this can of food sitting here. It's not peanut butter pretzels. I buy my food in bulk, and then I transfer it into about enough food for, you know, no more than 2 weeks. I don't really want it open in the air out here. It's in the spring, summer, and fall, it's 82 degrees in here. The humidity is really high, and you're like, that's just not that big a deal. But let me tell you, if you're doing anything out here for more than about 15-20 minutes, you are dripping, and food spoils pretty quickly. So I like to have just the amount out that I'm going to use in a, you know, no more than 2 weeks. So Flake Food here, I've got different sizes of pellets that I mix, and I'll buy, like I said, a 40-pound sack, keep it all chilled in a refrigerator or the freezer, mix sizes sometimes, and keep it in a useful container that some of them I'm feeding them off every 3 or 4 days, because I go through it that quickly. So a couple of pounds a day. A couple of interesting things on this row in particular, I think, are the killifish in this tank. And I got these very recently, and I'm not sure, this is a trio of Aphocinian Shostedi, it's the blue Galeris, and a trio. There's actually another female in there somewhere. But it's just a big, spectacular killie, and this is half grown, so they get much bigger. But these females are just full of eggs. And so I'm going to be working to see if I can get, you know, some fry out of them. It's a beautiful, beautiful killie fish. And then to just go in a totally different direction, right below them, I have some dwarf pikes. And I got these as CF wallacei, meaning it used to be nodophthalmus, but it isn't nodophthalmus. And I believe I have two species. So that's a female in the back, and she's going to hide, right? Is she gone completely?
Yeah, but I got her before.
Okay, so there's an odd out male up here. Oh, here's another female. I'm going to see if, let's see if she'll come out. Oh, come on, girl. You can do it. So they're getting chased around by the dominant pair, but what's interesting is that that one has the black dots in the dorsal fin. This is a female. And look, there's the dominant pair. They came out, they said, hey, you can't be out here. Look, now that female has no line and no dots. And the dominant female, with her nice reddish belly, I'm going to have to move those, it looks like, and put something else in. But just spectacular little pikes that came in. So we're not even sure what they are, but they're obviously full grown. I'm going to feed them some little fish, as Dr. Coleman recommended when he was telling us about spawning Crinocycla compressiceps, and we'll see if we can spawn some dwarf pikes. That would be, I think, super cool. For those of many of you who know me, I have a 13-year-old daughter, Angeli, and she wanted to show this Aureus chromis. This is an Aurea chromis tanganike, and she nets these out of the tub as fry, and they obviously can become a pretty big, spectacular fish. This fish is going to get much, much, much bigger than this, so it'll go to, you know, maybe 12, 14 inches potentially. So it's really a baby, but it's already got great color, so we're trying to grow it up, and if we can get the ACA convention back here, then she'll have this beautiful show fish, you know, when the ACA comes back. Or maybe we transport it and we take it. Maybe it's big enough where we'll fly it someplace and show the fish. So, you know, showing fish is a lot of fun, and especially for kids, I think it's a lot of fun. And I think it really, the super cool thing about this hobby, I've done it all my life. So I was 5 or 6 when I got my first fish. I was given 4 adult angelfish, and they were in a 1-gallon bowl. And there was not even like an air stone or anything in there. And I know you'll be shocked to hear they were all dead the next day. And my parents probably shouldn't have told me, but they mentioned that the neighbor that gave them to me was not very happy that they all died, like I had done something with them. Now you look back with the knowledge that we have now about fish, and you know that this was inevitable. It's amazing they went 24 hours. They were probably gasping within a couple hours in this bowl, and it was just a disaster waiting to happen. So I got into fish that young. I started keeping fish by the time I was in my early teens. I was buying cichlids, and I was riding my bicycle. I grew up in San Diego, so I was riding my bicycle up to 10 miles to fish stores to buy fish, and I've never really stopped. So this is my 3rd fish room. We had a single car garage converted to fish. Then we had a 4-car garage, 2.5 cars of it was fish. And now we have just a separate building for my fish. So the bad news about having a lot of space like this, and obviously having pretty eclectic tastes, like I just like fish. I'm not a cichlid guy, I'm not a catfish guy. I like all of them, and there's never enough space. So, you know, I'm running, I don't know, maybe 130 tanks, maybe a little more, and I could run 500. Well, I don't have I'm not up to it, but if I had 500 tanks that somehow maintained and everything, I could have fish in all of them and be perfectly happy, because there's so much diversity and it's so fun, and you learn so much about so many different things with the hobby. So I learned a little bit about water chemistry at a fairly young age. I learned what, you know, fish die from things. They get diseases. They, you know, I learned about bacterial filtration, you know, decades ago. So that tells us about our environment and, you know, how everything, a fish tank is not a bowl of sterile water. It's a miniature ecosystem. And if it's out of balance, your fish are going to be sick and you're not going to be successful. So I think that the hobby teaches us so many things about not just fish, but about the world and changes in the world. So would we care as fish hobbyists about dams in Brazil if we weren't fish hobbyists? We might not. But because we are fish hobbyists and we realize that that incredible biodiversity is going to disappear when they get the dams in, and along with it are the primates and the reptiles and the birds. You know, they're not going to be there. They're going to be gone. The mammals. And so, and frankly, it will change from a tropical rainforest to something totally different. It could turn out being a desert in the long run. The Saharan desert has grown dramatically in the last 75 years. There used to be a huge lake called Lake, I think it's Lake Chad, and it's shrunk up where, you know, there's large fishing vessels that are just sitting in the sand because the lake is now just a tiny little thing. So we're changing our world in a lot of different ways, and a lot of the things that we take for granted today, getting and keeping all these fish, are not going to be there for our kids. It's just the way it is. But keeping fish has had me be interested in all these changes worldwide. And also I've read up a little bit on history in Africa, and I think that's really interesting. And that's a totally loaded topic, but there's a super fun story about how the Brits wanted to challenge the Germans in Lake Tanganyika for naval superiority. Now, Lake Tanganyika is a very large lake, so the Brits built this ship that they could break down into pieces, and they go to the Zaire River on the west coast, and they go up the river 2,000 miles, and they portage this boat that they've built in pieces, and they were around waterfalls, and there's lots of them, and they portage and they carry, and they're carrying fuel. They've got this huge, massive expedition. They march over 2,000 miles. They go down into the swamp on the outskirts of Lake Tanganyika. They launch this boat, and it's, I don't know, you know, 35, 45 feet in that ballpark, and it's got a little cannon, like a 3-inch cannon on the front, and they're like, yeah, we succeeded, we got this. They run their boat out there, and the Germans had come in through Tanzania and brought in a naval vessel, literally a 200-foot ship with a 6-inch cannon. And they see this thing coming, and they're like, uh-oh, and they have to take the ship, and this is like a 5-year odyssey to get it there. They run their ship back into the swamp, and the story ended. I don't know if they actually portaged it back 2,500 miles out or not, but they're like, we're not going to be able to control Lake Tanganyika. The Germans are already in charge here. And it's just this incredible odyssey about, I mean, it's just this tiny little bit of history. And it's, I think, a rather funny story. So hopefully that's mildly interesting. So at some point, I started adding in tubs, and I got these, they're approximately 4 by 8 foot tubs. And they're pretty good for, you know, they're not super deep. I can get this one up about 1 foot deeper, but my dehumidifiers just suck the water off of it because of the surface area. But they're good for raising fish. You're looking down on fish, so it's not so good for mouth brooders and things, but a lot can go in here. So I'm going to try and drop this catfish out of here. And this is, and is he going to come out? He says, no, don't do it to me. He's not going to, and we're going to get the camera wet. There's, I believe, another one over here. Same species. So it's it's granulosus. It's not Oxidorus, but it's basically, it's a Brazilian or a South American cat. Excuse me. And very, very spiky, so I don't really want to touch it because he's pretty sharp with these spines on him. And they're supposed to go to, you know, maybe a couple of feet. We'll see. The big one was in that thing, and it obviously didn't want to come out. When it's out, I should take that out because he's kind of outgrown it, but Let's see if I can get out of here. Okay, so these tubs are really good for that. The upper tub actually has, and you know what, if I'm going to grab a step stool and see if I can find the fish of interest. So this whole tub, the upper one, is set up for one fish that's about 5 inches long. And it also is a set, the water comes, unfortunately, it comes from the big tub, and it does go through here. So unfortunately, it gets a lot of detritus, and I did not get this one cleaned. But let's see if we can find, we're looking for an elongate, there he is right there. So that fish is, oh God, not Paradoxus, Microlepis, Parisitis microlepis. It's a scale eater anyway from Lake Tanganyika. So what it makes its living coming up behind fish, and it has these really weird spoon-shaped teeth, and it zips them along the side of the fish. It comes up behind and removes a bunch of scales, and it's living on kind of the bacterial film and protein film on each scale. The scale itself has very little nutrition. So I have other fish in here just for him to scrape, because he's not super good at eating pellets and flakes and other things. And unfortunately, you can't even see them, but there's Oreochromis tanganikae in here. There's one. I saw a single zebra obliquidens, I believe, a minute ago. So odds and ends turn out in here, and they get shredded by that one fish. But it's really interesting, I think, the idea that you're going to make your living scraping the scales off a fish. And what's super interesting too is that the head actually tilts to one side a little bit, and I don't see, oh, there, that is him. The head tilts to the left or the right in the wild ones, and so most of them, you'll go out in the lake and you'll see them, and their heads all are kind of to the left. Well, their prey, the other fish, start to realize that these guys are always coming up from behind them on the right. And they're like, hey, we start watching over our shoulder to the right. Well, now those few that are actually their head goes to the left, to the right, they're coming up on the left side of the shoulder. Now they're more successful. So Lake Tanganyika is pretty heavily researched and studied, and they found that the majority of them having their head one direction or another changes about every 2 or 3 or 4 years. So they'll mostly, their head will be a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left at some kind of a ratio, and then they come, 3 years later it's reversed. So this natural selection is really interesting, on this one species, and it's not actually changing. It's changing the morphology of the fish, but it's not changing, it's still the same species, Parisitis microlepis. So I think it's just really an interesting fish, and it's worth dedicating this 4x8 tub to. And I got this fish, I'd say maybe 4, maybe 5 years ago. Matthew McGee was a grad student at Davis. He did his postdoc work with Ole Seehausen in Switzerland, and he's now a professor in Australia. And when he left, he had done a lot of work using my fish in his research. And so when he left me a lot of fish, and that was one that he left me. It was very nice of him. And so I just think that is a cool fish worth dedicating the space to. And oh, by the way, I have the space, and I have Oreochromis tanganikae to feed it, like tons and tons, which we'll see lots of soon. All right, we're down?
Yep. Okay.
So I keep, I have a dehumidifier in the room, and then I also have we did go down that aisle. But the dehumidifier drains into these 2 barrels, and it is essentially water that is 0 parts per million. And then I have these 3 barrels that are our well water, and I mean, it's not near enough water, but it does, in an emergency, I've got water sitting there and it's at the room temperature, ready to go. If I have a tank that is crashing for some reason, I've got, you know, 150 gallons of water that I can change out right now and make a big difference and maybe save some fish lives. So that's why I keep the barrels, and then I use the soft water. I'll mix it with my well water with some of these soft water fish, and I've had some success with soft water fish using my dehumidifier water. So I also keep carnivorous plants, and they have to have soft water, so I haul buckets of 5-gallon buckets of water to our back deck to keep about 100 sarracenias keep their feet wet. So it's a little bit of exercise for me, and also I need the water. So a great reason to save your water. So that's Hydrocynus vittata. It is the tiger fish from, it's found in Lake Tanganyika. It's not Goliath, so it's not the 5-foot. Every now and then on the internet, these pictures will go around of this like heavy-bodied barracuda with giant teeth, and I've seen them labeled as piranha and all kinds of things, and space aliens. Well, it's Hydrocynus. It's these African fishes that are super impressive dentition. And Goliath lives also in the Zaire River, among other places, which is a very fast-flowing river, and you know, you can grow a 5-foot fish in there with ginormous 2-inch teeth. And he needs them, because if the prey gets away, he's not going to catch it again. So I'm going to drop a couple of feeders in with that guy, because I have not got him on pellets yet, which is super annoying, but he is a great feeder, and maybe we'll be able to actually see his teeth even on this little guy that's like 5 inches long. So let's see what happens. So as I said, I'd much prefer to have him off of live food for a lot of reasons, but he is not yet. So he got a snail the first time. There he goes. It's gone. Nope. Okay. And if you can get him holding the fish, that's when you can actually, oh, did he just tear it in half? I think if you're able to slow that down, half the fish flew in a different direction. So I'm going to try, let's see if you'll get the other fish. Oh, it's hiding. I might put one more in because it's underneath the filter. Another itty bitty one. Okay, there's a minnow. Boom. Let's see if we can. So he's pushing against the glass so it doesn't get away. There, it's not going to get away. And unfortunately, he didn't cooperate worth a dang. But you can really see those teeth. Look at that smile. It's pretty impressive. So even at that size, you're like, I don't really want him to bite me. But, you know, I like bitey things too. So they're bitey, and he'll grow to maybe, if I was fortunate, he'd probably hit 3 feet. And I do have a place to put him, so it's not totally irresponsible, let me say. Watch your step, because there's hoses on the ground. This is pretty narrow, but so it's pretty dark down here. Lighting is a real challenge. I picked up this weird West African called Orthochromis storm's eye. And there's a female that's sitting on that tube. She has a mouthful of kids, so they're mouth breeders.
Flashlight it?
Sure. A little more color when you see them with a flashlight on them. And she left, but you know, they're getting beat up a little bit by these cyclosomines. It's Ceruleus, and they're hiding because of the flashlight, but is what it is. So I just like the fast water cyclosomines, the Central American big predator. You know, we think of them as big mean cichlids like Jack Dempsey's, and you know, Umbroferum is not Central American, but it's kind of the same idea. So these big mean fishes, but the fast water ones have an elongate body. They tend to lay bigger eggs, and I think they're particularly interesting. All of them are super cool. And then we go back to Africa and we get these Danikilia, and I don't believe it may have been described since I got them, but I got them as species Saccharoi. So it's a soda lake fish, so it likes super hot, high pH, high hardness in the water. And I've raised these up from little itty bitty guys, and they should be about spawning size. And it may be that my well water is just not quite hard enough. So I've been slowly adding calcium and sodium carbonate to both raise the pH. Between the two of them, they raise the pH and also the hardness, and see if we can get them to go. And kind of an interesting thing, I'll say I'm really slow to the dance in a lot of ways. So one of our local aquarists, Pam Chen, has been buying castles for years. And you think, I mean, I used to think that was the funniest thing. She was buying all these castles, and she just really loved her castles. And I thought it was like, Pam, you're buying castles because you like that castle in your tank. And I finally figure out that Pam is one hell of a lot smarter than I am, because she's buying the castles because they're a heck of a lot lighter than a rock. They can be moved around. They don't fall over and crush fish. You're not going to drop it through the bottom of a glass tank. They're just not heavy, and they make great cover for fish. It was obvious to Pam early on, and she made a real fun game out of it. And now if I'm at a meeting and there's castles and Pam's there, I'm more than happy to bid against her, because boy, it really makes a difference to have silly plastic castles in your tanks. Like, that's probably, oh, it's got a hole in it, but even with a hole in it, that's, you know, more than 5 pounds. And if that was a plastic castle, it'd be less than a pound. So I've got the alligator head in there, very light. The fish seem to like the alligator head. It looks really silly. There's a little castle-y thing here of rocks, but the fish don't care that it's a castle. They want to know, you know, what you need is, you know, fish are commonly territorial, and even with big tanks, we are not providing them near what they're used to in the wild. So what you want is line of sight disruption, so that they can't see each other. A school will stay together, but two fish that don't like each other, if they can't see each other, then they're not particularly aggressive. So you really need to break up your tank, break up the sight lines, and castles do a great job of that, and they also provide hiding places. So Pam, thank you for leading me to the water so many times and not giving up, even though I didn't drink for many, many years. I finally drank the water. I can learn. I just am slow. There's a man in, I believe he lives in Washington, named Lawrence Kent. He's just a super fish guy and a super nice guy. And he works for the Gates Foundation, trying to help people in various places in Africa grow food better. So he's an ag specialist. And when he's not doing his actual job, he gets a local and he runs out to local streams and collects fish. And he gets them back alive. So he brought back, it's no longer Steatocranus irvini. The genus has changed, the species has not. I'll see if I can flashlight him. So he brought back, and I believe, it wouldn't surprise me if these were wild, because they're huge. They also call it the blue-lipped Steatocranus, because the lips are kind of a funny blue color. They do not like the light. But see that little fish on the rock there? Then I'm going to pan to the right. Oh, there's one right here in the middle. That's their fry. So I got them. Eric Thomas brought them down, and I put them in this 100-gallon tank, and a lot of people don't have a spare 100-gallon tank sitting around. So I did. I put them in here. Eric kept smaller ones. These guys spawned right away. I removed most of the fry, but there's still several there. There's a couple on the bottom, and you can see they're just scattered throughout the tank. And the parents so far have not killed them. So super interesting West African goby type cichlid, fast water, super aggressive, really fun, and it's kind of one of those mythical fish that you hear of but you never see. And Lawrence Kent brought them back alive, and he's bred them, and now they're on, I've seen them on a couple of price lists, and who knows, maybe we'll be able to keep this really strange beast around for a while. Moving down, so I've talked at the meeting about the giant hatchet fish, and so here's a colony of them growing up. They were ½ inch when I got them, so they're definitely growing, and they're not dithers, but they're a good fish to keep over the top of plecos because they don't really eat baby plecos. So I have Triactis in here, and I also have these little, they call them the small spot Queen Arabesque, and there's a baby one in the back pot. I don't know if you can see that little baby in there. Does that show? So they are spawning, and they've been producing fry for quite a while for me. And I don't get a lot of fry. I'm definitely not Eric Thomas. He's a much better aquarist. But it's fun. They spawn, and you know, you see these little spotted catfish swimming around. And then I've been told repeatedly that we can mix our loricariids, so I thought the Triactis would be fun to go with them, and the Triactis get a lot bigger. And I got this really spectacular one with a lot of orange on it there. So I thought I was very fortunate that the wholesaler sent that. It's like, wow, that's lucky. So the dithers on the top don't eat fish. So they're not going to go down to the bottom and eat my baby plecos, and I get to grow them up and get them into a bigger tank at some point, and I would love to spawn those, and the genus is not going to come to me right now. It'll all of a sudden come to me and I'll blurt it out, but they're a really interesting giant hatchet fish. It'll go to like 8 inches, or there's several species, they'll go 8 to 12 inches or more. There's an interesting doctor that lives in, I believe it's Wisconsin. I should know, but I'm pretty sure Wisconsin. And he imports fish from Canada from a guy named Oliver Lucanus. And Oliver is a collector who goes to places that probably shouldn't go. Like, he had his crew out crossing a minefield to get to a location to gather fish. So a lot of these weird mid-continent or West African cichlids come through Oliver Lucanus in Canada. He's a really funny and interesting guy, and he's spoken to our club a couple of times. Just tremendous guy. But he lives in Canada, so we have to have an import permit to get fish from him. So the doctor imports the fish, and he got this one, and this is an Oreocomus from Lake Edwards. And, sorry. And I have fry of these. But at this size, they're fairly pretty. So my understanding is that unfortunately they may turn out turning pink, which would be very disappointing. But they are spawning at this size, and they have, you know, lots of blues and greens on them, and they're, you know, it's a nice fish. And even with all this scattering around, if I walk over and get food and hold it up there, oh, here's our, oh, he ran. They would be right at the top going crazy. Oh, and Michael and I were talking when he first showed up that I use these box filters. So I put, that's coral gravel on the bottom, and it basically buffers so the pH won't crash. And then I use a Hagen sponge that I cut in a circle and stick on there. And then when I'm cleaning, I pull the whole thing out, I squeeze the sponge a few times in my hands and rinse out the box filter and put it back in there. And it's amazing how heavy they can be if I don't get to them. They'll fill to the top with detritus, the sponge is full, they hold a lot of gunk, and yet they don't clog, which is really nice. I've got a couple more of these Synodontis vellifer. There's one here and there's one down below. Just a really, I had never seen them before, and I turned out with 4 of them. So I feel like I was very fortunate to get them. Here's another way to do plecos. So these are king tigers, and I've got to say mine are not the nicest king tigers I've ever seen, but I have spawned them several times. This particular group hasn't really gone for me, which is disappointing, but I also have the vampire pleco, the species of fin, which is the black fish with the white dots. So I think they're actually, I'll call them the more stunning of the two species in here. Although there are some nice king tigers, but those are sharp. And then for a dither in here, I have Ramphichromos, and oddly enough, it's not working very well for the Ramphichromos because they eat mid-water, and if the food gets to the bottom, the plecos are all over it, and I'm having trouble keeping weight on them, so I'm going to have to get a different floating pellet and then potentially just move them because they're not thriving in here. So they'd prefer a little more space and a lot more food. I'm trying to just look at things that I think are, I'll say, more interesting. And I'm going to point down here the same postdoc, Matt McGee, who's the professor now. He came up with, I think he came up with the idea, I don't know, he traveled around, gave lots of talk, but somebody came up with this idea of using these upside down baskets from like Office Depot. And you do have to put a brick on them because they will get a little air under there and they float up. So I keep a rock or something on top. But we were talking about hiding places and visual barriers and things that slow fish down from getting together and nailing the other fish. And these work surprisingly well. So, you know, they're not very expensive. They're not heavy. You do have to weight them with something a little bit to hold them down. But wow, what a great idea, right? Who thinks of these things? And Matt also gave me this Victorian fish, and it is called a blue tip. They have fairly long ventral fins, and that's about as big as it gets. He's not colored up, so there's not a female ready to go, but he can be more colorful than that, and that's it. That's as big as it gets, and it's not particularly aggressive, and I don't really know anybody else that has them, so I need to do a good job spawning them and getting some out there because I don't know where Matt got them, but you know, it may be that nobody else has them. So I really I've got one tank of fry. I've had them for several years now, but I need to do a better job of getting them out into the hobby to people like me that are interested in these weird little fish that are hard to find and come from obscure locations. So that way I think that'd be a good thing to get moving on, Rich. So I have a fish that's a nemesis, and there's a baby one sitting on the bottom in this tank. And I talked about these at one point. That's Teleogramma burchardi, and that's a juvenile. And they're not, oh, there's another one over here. How does that work? And so if you noticed when it turned that the tail, they're about a quarter of the top of the tail was kind of a pinkish white color, and as adults that'll be females, but when they hatch and when they're young they all have it, and if they're males they'll lose the white pinkish part and it'll just become a very fine white trim. So there's obviously a pair of adults in here. They're another fast water kind of goby-like cichlid, no swim bladder, reduced to next to nothing. So they bop along the bottom. And I had seen them in Capitol Aquarium back in the early 80s and on, and now and then they get imported. Always wild fish because they're a pain to deal with. There's some people in Colorado that bred them. I mean, they've definitely been bred. A number of our speakers have bred them, including Ted Judy. And I talked to him about it, and I finally, I said, I have just got to do this right. I'm going to set up a 55-gallon tank, provide a lot of cover, and see what happens. So I set it up, and it worked. They spawned, and now I can lay this to rest that for all the Teleogramma burchardi that I've had over the last, I guess it would be 30 years now, I now have them spawned, and I've distributed some and sold some, and so it's no longer that, what do you call it, your seagull, or what's the, there's a term for, yeah, it's no longer that chip on my shoulder, you fish, I have beat you. I have spawned them, and I do have, these are actually African tetras for the most part. There's one that's not, but Congo tetras, and then these nice big yellow-eyed tetras. And it looks like I don't see a male for the yellow eyes. So at some point, I've had them for quite a few years, and I've lost, no, let's see, is that the male? That big guy might be the male. Oh yeah, that big one is the male. So he's got, his dorsal fin is much longer than the females. So that's how you would tell that that one big yellow-eyed tetra Elistes is a male. So we mentioned at the other end that my daughter likes polypterus, and so we have even more polypterus. So we have Enlicari and Palmus type and Senegalensis and Delhaize in this tank, I believe. And there's the little albino Senegalensis. It came to a meeting at one point, and my daughter had to have it, so here it is. It's the way these things work, right? So, and I do actually, I mean, I do breed some fish. Actually, they do the work, and I'm pretty fortunate. But this is Melanitania parva, those big, that big load of fish. They're big lunkers on the other end, and they're from Gary Lang originally. I have another tank of them, and they're essentially orange when they color up and they're happy, the males. So very pretty little fish, and I've got lots of fry, so kind of, I feel fortunate there. And their rainbows are really easy. I mean, you know, you put a mop in, they lay a bunch of eggs in the mop, and you take the mop out and move it, and you know, feeding the fry is the challenge. You want to put them in a fairly small tank so that the fry can find the food and keep the water clean, and feed them, you know, say a 50 microgram in size food as a newly hatched fry, and then you slowly up the size as the fry grows, and you can grow rainbows. And so it's fairly, like, there's a process to them, definitely, and it's pretty straightforward. I mentioned earlier spawning the Synodontis. So here's my spawning deal. So I have a clay pot. Oh, no, that's not. Okay, so I have a clay pot with a hole in the top. Nice soft edges on it. I'm just going to set it there, just out of the way. Then here, oh, now that's why I don't have any eggs in here. So the marbles are to keep any fish from getting in here, because the adults will go in the hole in the top. They drop all their eggs over the marbles, and the marbles land in the glass jar, and then you take the jar and you dump it out.
Camera troubles, but we're back. We
are back with minimal trouble. So there's a couple of West African cichlids in here as well, and they're from my doctor friend, and at the moment they're brownish, and I believe, and there was a tag on here, and I think I took the tag off and threw it away, and now I'm not sure. I will know one of this. I'm gonna have to figure out what I got in there. But one's a Crater Lake species, and the other one's riverine, and it was pretty exciting to get them. They're pretty obscure, so I'll have to actually do the research to find out what I've got. And speaking of obscure, in this tank I've got mostly fry. The biggest one is not of the rest, like the rest of them. The biggest one is Stomatepia mariae, but the rest of them are Embipia lutea, and there's actually a couple of females holding. So it's this nice little African mouth brooder, and you know, attractive little guy, doesn't get too big, lots of color when they're small, when you know, younger, and they're pretty easy to breed. But I don't really know many people that have them. So if you're interested in Embipia lutea, let me know. It's kind of a fun little fish. try this. I'm going to blind your lens there. That can't. So this is more Barumbian bowfish. This is Stomatepia pindu, and I can't come up with the other one. It's a sponge eater from Barumbian bow, and for some reason the name's not going to come to me, which is okay. But this real pretty Synodontis from Lake Foix, and there's not much in Lake Foix, but this fish is there, and it's an African lake, a little beautiful Synodontis called Synodontis pardalis. And that one, he's not super happy right now, but just a beautiful, beautiful fish. There he goes. He's going to swim around. He says, "Rich, why did you do that to me? That was not nice." And then we're also growing up an Oxidorus. There we go. An Oxidorus Niger. So that fish will grow to about 4 feet. And we got him as a little teeny guy. Let's see if he'll get his little nose out. The back end of these guys also have a bunch of very sharp serrated scutes. I don't want him to turn and slash me. I don't know if it would hurt or not. I'm sure some people have been slashed, and the big ones definitely would hurt. That I know. But we're trying to grow him up and get him to size, and so far he's not cooperating. He's not growing super fast, which is a little bizarre. He should be growing faster than he is, but it's one of those things. The fish grow at the speed that they grow, and I've never been accused of underfeeding my fish. So I've been accused of lots of things. That's not one of them. So up here I have 2 species of loricariids. I've got the queen arabesque and some L14s that are growing up. And the queen arabesques, we saw the spotted queen arabesque on the other side. So here's the original version, the stripy ones, a tiny little loricarid. And I have had them spawn in this tank several times. Raising fry is a challenge, so I'll turn out with a fry here and there. And hopefully if I retire in the not far future, I'll be able to work with them and really get them to go. It's a beautiful little pleco, and I think people would like to have them if they were more available, and you just don't see them around that much. Finally, we're almost to the end of the row here. 12th battery.
Pretty much.
Up top is Stomatepia mongo, and I got these from the brilliant crazy doctor. This is the deep water Stomatepia from Barumbian bow, and they were seen in seines, research seines, but getting a deep water fish out of there was a real challenge, and their body shape is really interesting. I did not expect that. So he sent me a group, and I feel very fortunate and excited to have them, and hopefully we'll get some fry going and we can get those distributed as well, because it's just a nice fish. I love the body shape. So I probably noticed I like I don't necessarily have a bunch of bright blue fish or green fish or yellow fish. I like body morphology. I like weird shaped jaws that are made for doing different things. Different teeth. These fish with their real elongated snout. Like, what is the selection pressure that would produce that huge head with the real long pointed nose on it compared to the other Stomatepia, which don't have that? So I just think, to me, that's a major driver for me, is my interest in, if I see a fish and it's got a weird body shape, I'm all over it. It's like, whoa, that's weird, I'll take 6, maybe 12. And that's, I think, these giant hatchets. These are juveniles still. I have a pair in here. There's the male. So these are not near grown. And, that's a super cool body shape. Like, what is that big keel for on these guys? Is that muscle so they can jump? I don't know. But I think it makes for a really interesting fish. And then we also have plecos in here. We have the Lepardus plecos, which is, I think it's a beautiful fish. I don't know why they're not more popular. I have several, and I'm trying to block the entrances to caves to see if that'll make a difference. So I'm going to look in here. I'm going to stick my head down there and look in. Is there anybody? Well, here's another big guy. He's like, hey, can I block her in there? That's definite. That looks like a male to me. But they get pretty big, so that's probably one reason why they're not quite as popular. But boy, that is just a really big, pretty pleco, I think. And as you all know, plecos, the males sit in a cave all the time. A female gets ripe, she comes along, she swims in his cave, and he blocks her in and he won't let her leave. And then she lays her eggs, and she's like, hey dude, now it's your problem, I'm out of here. She leaves, he takes care of the eggs. So this is all paternal care. Mom's gone, she's trying to get ripe so she can go find another guy. It's pretty smart there, gals. And then I also do breeder flats with some things in them. And I think the interesting thing about these breeder flats is that there's a little history here. So these breeder flats were in a wholesaler in Woodland either 1,000 years ago, or else they went out of business in the 80s, I believe, called Cape Aquatics. And they had hundreds of these that they built themselves, and they went out of business. They sold them. People have sold them 3 or 4 times, and eventually they turned out at some guy in Yuba City's place, and then somebody I knew bought them, and he in transport broke a whole bunch of them. But I turned out with, I don't know, 30 or so of them. So these tanks that were built by hand for a fish wholesaler in, I don't know, 60s or 70s maybe, 1960s, 1970s, went out of business in the 80s, and here they are in 2020 still being used for fish. So kind of fun. Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
The kind of seals and
oh yeah, yeah, totally, yeah, and they're coming apart. In this one, let's see if we can find, there's Corydoras Robinet in here, which I would really like to spawn. It's the flag-tailed cory. There's also 2 black cories, so there's a big female Robinet. So on sand like this, they're not as dark as they would be on a darker substrate, but they have a very nice flag tail. Let's see if we can get one to slow down. There's 2 black cories in here as well, but I don't know if you can't really tell that they have a black tail on them. Let's see. Well, spotted with black, with very nice stripes on the tail. Very pretty little cory. And then underneath this piece of wood is another Titanicus pleco. So I got this one, and they're ridiculously expensive. And I got him when he couldn't have been an inch long. I couldn't believe how tiny he was. So he's really growing well in here. He's ginormous now, but he'll actually grow to like 15 inches given time. So kind of ridiculous. You get this tiny, tiny little pleco, and you're hoping you can get it up to a foot in a decade or more. I don't know. We'll see. I do some rainbows along here, some Tanganyikans, so this is Wanaments. At one point it was impossible to get these. They were all hybrids out there, and now we actually have some really nice stock that not only does Gary Lang have them, but Cichlid Exchange has a source that I'll say, since Gary is the rainbow guy, I really like the Cichlid Exchange, but Gary says rainbows from the Cichlid Exchange are what they say they are. You're getting the real deal. So I think that's pretty cool that we have, a nice purebred Wanaments. It's not a hybrid. So, and more cories, and then I have these Heterochromis, is that right? Heterochromis multidens, and it is this very primitive West African, and it's supposedly like all the other fish, they originated from something very much like this. It's an ancestral fish, so it's really primitive, kind of a bizarre fish, and there's nothing else like it. It's in its own genus, and it looks more like a Central American cyclosomine, which I think is really also interesting. So I only have 5. I've got my fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. Give me a year or 2. So some of the big tanks are given to me. This one was given to me. It's a 360-gallon tank. It's 5 feet by 3 feet by, I think, 2 feet deep. So it's a really odd shape. And it's a big box. And the fish like it. I mean, they're nervous in it. When there's not people here, it works really well. You know, they're not all this shy. But they spawn in here. They seem very happy in here. But I cannot get anything out of this. You've got a square box. Try chasing a fish in a box like this. It's even with plenty of big openings on top, it's very difficult to catch fish in here. So Coptodon walteri, these are babies that have survived. So that's the bigger gray fish in there. And then the others are Ceratherodon or Cerathrodon naueri. And I believe it's another Crater Lake mouth brooder, and they actually are somewhat attractive, but they're kind of a golden color with a blue head on some of them. But the tank is old and scratched, and you just can't really see anything in here. So I believe they're spawning. I think their fry are not very bright, so they all get eaten. And you know, anything that's related to a substrate spawning tilapia is going to be tough and able to take care of itself. So the walteri, their fry are doing well. I mean, there's been hundreds, you know, laid and hatched in here, but the fact is that you can get walteri fry. That there will probably never be Cerathrodon naueri swimming around in here. I'm going to have to watch and get in there with a net and chase, and when the female spits, get a turkey baster and try and suck up eggs before the other fish eat them all. But someday, we'll see. And you know, crazy doctors provide these fish as well. So there was a fish store in Sacramento called Capitol Aquarium. Most of you know of it. If you walked around in their fish room and you went by a large tank, they called it their 1,000-gallon tank. This is it. So when they closed down, they had it for sale, and I called them up and I said, I am not interested in buying it, but I am able to move it. So if you can't get somebody that can move it, then you're going to have to break it up to get it out, you know, out of there. You're going to have to get it in pieces, and that's going to be a challenge. So I would be more than happy to actually come and get it and haul it out of there for you, but I will, you know, it's an all-day job to move a tank this big. It's very heavy. 2 days later, my phone rang. They said, come and get it. So I brought it up here, put it on a flatbed. We used piano rollers. So I jack up a side, screw a 2x4 on the bottom, put a piano roller under that, and a tank that 4 strong people can't lift the corner of empty. You get it on those piano rollers, and one person can push it across a hard floor. The difference is remarkable. So that's how I moved it out of there. Unfortunately, the stand was completely rotted. If they had not have gone out of business, it was going to fall on somebody. It was that bad. It had been there 40 years. The damage to the legs, and I mean, several of the legs were just completely shot. So I actually was pretty terrified that it would collapse on the freeway before I got home. Somehow it made it. We got it here, and it was so scratched up from being there for all those years. And you know, it's an old tank. It's what you expect from plexiglass. You couldn't see through it. So I spent over a year with it sitting here with no water, and I polished and cleaned, and I had a lot of help from Rod Finney. Super great guy, boy. I mean, it would be horrendously ugly without his work, but now we can see through it. It's nice, smooth, polished the heck out of it. We also put in we drilled a bulkhead. We put in a bulkhead fitting on the bottom, and we re-drilled the bulkhead fitting on the other side for a drain. So we have this nice tank that I can actually change water, drain water, get water in and out of, and it works pretty well. And I mentioned Oreochromis tanganike, so here's This is Chromos tanganikae, and there's a female holding. And it can be a beautiful fish, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be kind of a big, but you get a little light on them and you can see, you know, it's not totally unattractive, and they can be a lot prettier. And then Chromos Restratus is this big blue guy there. And I think it's a spectacular Malawi fish. And they get big and they don't show much color until they're big. And the females, so that's a slender female, that spotted fish there. That's what the females look like, and that's what the fry look like. And they have to be big before they show color. That guy would, if that's a male, it's not big enough to show color. So it's a pain to deal with them. They get so big and they're super hyper, and they'll shoot around the tank and damage themselves. And but they are, boy, are they worth the effort if you have the space for them. I also have a bunch of hybrids in here, which is very frustrating. A bulk of these smaller stripy looking fish are hybrids that, like that is a hybrid. So that's a hybrid, that's a hybrid, that's a hybrid, and then all of this gray, brown, stripy stuff is hybrids. And I thought, I've got to do something about that. So I first put in this big pair of Venustus, which are supposed to be pretty predatory. Well, I get more hybrids than the Venustus can eat, I suppose, because I just kept getting more and more. So I added in, see if I can find the guy, Bucochromos noditania. So it's supposed to grow to about 15 inches, and it is a Malawi predator. And there is a young male being chased by a Ramphichromos, another predator. There's one there, there's another one back there, and so it's a big blue-green fish when it gets very large, and they have a mouth on them. They are predatory, so I'm hoping they'll start cutting down my population of hybrids. I also have Synodontis in here, so it's Synodontis Grandiops, which is the mouth-brooding parasite. So there's 2 of them. There's 3. And there's fry in here, so that's kind of fun. There, with all the spawning going on, every now and then you'll look in and you're like, oh, there goes a little tiny Synodontis multipunctatus. Well, we used to call, for years, we thought they were multipunctatus, redescribed in about 2007 as Grandiops. The true multipunctatus gets much bigger and hasn't been in the hobby in a long time. So we actually have Grandiops in the hobby, and it's kind of fun to get fry, and I was just watching to see if I'd see a little one. But they tend to stay hidden, and like I said, every now and then you'll see somebody go by. There's a pair of Synodontis granulosus in here, which is a deep water Syno, and it's a gray fish with white trim, very elegant, and they just don't come into the hobby very often. So I have a male and a female, and I've had them for, oh, there's one right there. That's granulosus. So you can't see them through all the fish, but I've had them for 15 years maybe. So as I said, Synodontis live a very long time. Maybe I get retired and I can figure out how to work with Synodontis granulosus. They're also super conspecifically aggressive, so you got to deal with the fact that they're going to try and kill each other, and that's always, I mean, that adds a layer of challenge to it. But at least I have a pair, right? I have a chance because I have a pair. So we've worked around. Oh, I have one air system that runs the air in the whole room. I have a little blower, so all the air is piped and runs all over. But the 900, the 1000, and the this upper tub, and then the big tub that we're going to look at next, have multiple filters on them, and there's one big pump that runs the water. It pumps the water up and it goes across here and it gets dropped into this tank, goes through this trickle filter on the end, and that's a, you know, that's pretty good size filter, and it's more than 2 feet that way, so it's a pretty big box, and it has matin filters in it. And then there's a 55-gallon barrel on the end, And then I also just kind of run, like I'll just run the water for several days, and you know, to make sure it starts getting that brown tinge to it. So I'll just turn the hose on and let it run, not real fast, but it just runs and you know, keeps it nice and clean. So we'll walk that way. I'm going to grab some pellet food before we do. Now, I wish my daughter was here because this is her job, but so we can no longer stick our fingers in the water because we have 2 rescue pacu in here, and pacu in the Amazon eat fruits and nuts, and they have incredible chompers, and they would just take your finger right off. So you do not stick your finger in here. They also move seeds, like tree seeds, all up and down the Amazon. So they are partially responsible for the botanical diversity. The diversity of the forest in the Amazon is by these fish that get much bigger than this. And the smaller one I got when it was probably 12, 14, no more than 14 inches. So my daughter trained the catfish to come up for food. So you notice this big Oxidorus Niger is, everybody's kind of swimming right here. I'm going to put some food out in the middle so that the pacu go over there. The Oxidorus will probably come over here. I'm going to tap the side. They should come this way. Hopefully you don't get, here he comes. There you are, big guy. Look at this guy. He says, where's my food already? You're going to pet me, but you're not going to feed me? There's something wrong with this picture. And then this is Liarius picta. So the pacu's back near me, and we could get wet. I'm going to tell you, like, okay, they can splash like a son of a gun. So Liarius marmorata are now coming up, and you saw Jonathan's fish room. Was that last month? No, 2 months ago.
2 months ago, yeah.
So Jonathan grew up this Liarius marmorata, one of the long, so this is Liarius picta. This is Liarius marmorata. And he called me up. I didn't know him, but he knew that I had this big tank. Come on, dude. Here, let me pour that in. And my daughter taught him all me to do this. I just would come in and throw the food, and she's like, you know, let's train them. So they're all trained because of Angeli. Let's get some more out there so the pacu will stay away, because I don't want to. Here you go, big guy. So he brings out, he says, oh yeah, you know, the fish, it's probably, you know, 20 inches. And I was like, yeah, you know, I mean, I had no idea who he was, didn't know him from Adam. And I'm used to people saying 20 inches and they show up with a fish and it's like 10, 12 inches. And you're like, you know, okay, if it's big enough to go in the tub, we'll put it in there. And he shows up with his fish, and it was an honest 20-inch fish. I was like, oh my gosh. So it went into the tub, and so I have 3 Liarius marmorata, which are the lighter colored ones with the spots on them, and then 1 Liarius picta, and I think that's pretty big for picta. They're just not supposed to be that big. Pacu are coming back. And interestingly, there's at least 3 species of pacu, and I have 2 here. So if you look at, I don't know if you can see them, and you know what, in the underwater video, I'll bet you will be able to tell. So one has black on the bottom third of it, and the other one is just silver bodied with a little bit of pink on it. So there's, as I said, there's like 3 species, at least 3 species. One of them is relatively cold water tolerant. Most of them want nice warm water. The cold water tolerant one, we would not want it being released because it might be able to survive. Not in the American River, but you know, in a river that's not getting below, say, the mid-50s, you know, I wouldn't bet that species would not survive there. And they get so huge. You know, they'll go to 4 feet, and I don't know what they weigh at 4 feet because they're so round, but it's a big, heavy fish. So you don't ever let your fish go, and especially don't let something go that has, you know, just because you think it's from the Amazon drainage doesn't ensure that it actually can't live in the wild. It's really important that we not release our fish. I was watching a discussion about invasive species, and Peter Moyle, who is Mr. California Fish, said that he thought that California should create a list of fish that are okay in California. So we would not be able to keep very much because you know, you'd have a list of 15 or 20 species, and that would be what you could keep, and nothing else is legal. And the problem with a list is, Corydoras as an example, we had, you know, a couple of dozen species of Corydoras if you go back, you know, 20, 30 years, and now we have hundreds. And each new species would have to go through some process to be approved for being able to be kept. And they don't have staff to do that. They're not going to do it. So we would, you know, here's Corydoras. They're not only are they not going to live here, they probably wouldn't be, they probably wouldn't cause a problem if they somehow, you know, if you got a cold water one, which there's a couple of species, they probably wouldn't be a problem if they did, but all these new fishes we would not have been able to keep. All the new plecos we wouldn't have been able to keep because they would not be on the list. And a whole bunch of the things that are already here are problematic. So don't let your fish go if you don't want it anymore, for sure. And take care of what you got, because, you know, we have these things now, but, you know, you may go back to and say, you know what, I had whatever it was 10 years ago. Teleogramma burchardi, I'd really like to get Teleogramma burchardi again. It may be that they're extinct. And I think we're on this cusp of massive extinctions in freshwater fish. And keep what you can, enjoy what you can, and know that 20 years from now, you may not be able to get it again. Well, thank you very much for coming out here, Michael, and for all of you joining in on YouTube. I'll tell you that Michael does a tremendous job. You feel like you're, you know, if you have something interesting to say, don't hesitate, because Michael makes it very easy. The Sacramento Aquarium Society is very fortunate that Michael shares his talents with us, and I'm very pleased to share my fish room. It's a passion that I've obviously had for many years. I do lots wrong. I do a few things right, but, you know, we're all in this together, enjoying our hobby and trying to share it. And I think that's what this is about, right? To enjoy our hobby, to enjoy camaraderie, make friends, and share the hobby. That's the Sacramento Aquarium Society in a nutshell to me. And that's why I'm so happy to be a member and a life member of the Sacramento Aquarium Society. So thanks a lot.